My guest today is Noah Cowan, Executive Director of the San Francisco Film Society. Every year they organize the San Francisco International Film Festival, and today we are talking to him about the 58th San Francisco International Film Festival. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
So this is the 58th Film Festival and technically the first film festival that probably has your stamp, even though you joined the society last year, the Film Society last year.
Yes, I joined the organization about in late February of last year. I was able to be involved in some of the sort of bigger films and bigger guests. But yes, we've gone through a fairly substantial planning cycle over the last year. It's kind of set a somewhat new direction for the organization in terms of just how it's expressing itself, how it's communicating to the world. And I think that that was a collective process, and I think all of us are really excited about applying some of these new findings to the programming at this year's festival. And so, I guess it's my stamp, but it's really our stamp. I think that the modernized stamp of the San Francisco Film Society on the festival itself is something you will definitely see.
What is different about this year's festival, and what is the strategic direction you're taking the festival this year?
The actual films themselves that are being presented this year probably won't feel that much different to longtime festival goers. What may feel different is where we're putting an emphasis, how we're organizing the festival, how the 2-week period will actually play out. I think we've reorganized the program so it really responds to different audience needs. So you as an audience member will be able to find your own tribe, the kind of film goers that you actually want to be part of. And then some of the programs you may want to dip into to take a little sample, to sort of see what you like, or if there's something of special interest in another section, you'll go there. But maybe you'll stick to your own area. If you like the bigger movies, you'll be with the marquee section. If you like the kind of beautiful films from around the world, you'll be with Global Visions, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're really encouraging people to sort of see themselves in our festival guide and see themselves in our festival. The other significant change, I think, is that we're kind of acknowledging where we are, that San Francisco and the Bay Area has certain values, expresses certain ideas, and sort of behaves in its own peculiar and particular way. This place is like no other on earth. And I think maybe in the past we've sort of ignored that, and we've sort of said, well, we're just going to show great cinema, and that'll be that. This year, we really consciously looked at the films that we were selecting and kind of organized them in ways that really correspond to what I'm calling Bay Area values. So kind of an interest in innovation, a kind of curiosity about technology, a commitment to the planet, certain kinds of lifestyle ideas that are revolving around sort of food and beauty and nature that are really, really resonant here. And I think that we've made it clear within the festival that we're supporting films and feel as though we can provide something extra, something special to those films as they actually take their journey into the worlds of distribution.
You mentioned the word tribe, and then you mentioned the special values of the city by the bay, and most of it has got this technology angle to it. Is that the reason you chose Man and the Machine as your opening night film, which has got both plus and minus buzz?
The technology sector in the Bay Area is a very important part of the puzzle of this ecology. It's not everything, though. There's also an incredible social and political dynamic, a real commitment to the humanities, obviously based around Berkeley, but in many of our wonderful colleges and universities, and just a kind of a curiosity about the globe too, which is distinct from our technology sector. They're getting a lot of press these days. They're making a lot of money and creating a lot of things that are really impacting the planet, mostly in positive ways. And so, of course, we talk about them a lot. The opening film, Steve Jobs' Man in the Machine, appealed to us on so many different levels for our Bay Area audience. Of course, he was an incredibly important mogul in the tech sector, but the film, directed by incredibly important and prolific documentary maker Alex Gibney, actually asks a different question, which is, what does it mean to be a leader in this field or in any field today? How do we actually inspire people to imagine the future? How tough do we need to be with people to actually get them there? And I think the film pulls no punches about Steve Jobs' personal life. It celebrates the achievements of Apple and asks some difficult questions about our own environment here and what his role has been in creating not just the technology sector, but frankly, the modern world and very much so the modern Bay Area. The film has actually received extremely positive notices. There's always going to be a few people who will have quibbles with a documentary portrait of this nature, particularly of someone of this iconic status, but pretty much across the board, every major publication has called it one of the landmark documentaries of the year. So we're actually very confident that this is a film of quite extraordinary quality, and people can make up their own minds about the content when they see it.
Right now, there's another version of Steve Jobs' film being made here by Danny Boyle, whom you probably saw in Toronto when he came out with Slumdog Millionaire. So have you met Danny Boyle while he's filming the new movie on Steve Jobs here?
Unfortunately, I did not get the chance to see Danny Boyle while he was here in the Bay Area. I was traveling a great deal, and I think he was a very busy man during that time. However, I've met Danny many times. The one thing I do know about him is that he'll bring his own vision and his own belief and his own perspective on the Steve Jobs story, which will be very, very different from Alex Gibney's and will certainly be different from what I would think are going to be many other films that we're going to see over the coming years. I personally am going to be fascinated to see both because I think Alex Gibney is such a gifted storyteller. His documentary films can sometimes feel like fictions. And Danny Boyle is such a wonderful realist filmmaker that sometimes his fiction films can feel very close to reality. So we might end up with a very interesting hybrid pair.
Talk to us about the centerpiece film and the closing night film and some of the guests that you're expecting here. You have Richard Gere coming, you have Guillermo del Toro coming in. So you've got a pretty exciting lineup of films and guests for the festival.
Yeah, I mean, we always attract very interesting guests to the festival, and this year's array is no different. We're very pleased that Jason Segel is going to be joining us for our centerpiece film, The End of the Tour. It's a performance that really surprised people. I think when people learned at the Sundance Film Festival that he was going to be playing David Foster Wallace, there was a bit of disbelief. He's considered to be a comedian. Foster Wallace, of course, one of our great intellectuals and considered a rather serious person. But the film changed everything, and I think it really was the breakout performance of that festival and has set him on a course for a very different career. Whether this film will result in nominations come Oscar or Golden Globe times, it's too early to really predict. But I do know that he's going to be taken very seriously after this as a serious actor. And so I think you'll see someone who's going to be very much top of mind in award seasons to come, but you're going to see it first in this film. Our closing night film, Experimenter, is another film that I think has a lot of resonance for the Bay Area right now. It's a film about the scientist Stanley Milgram and his obedience experiments, which landed him in a lot of hot water because they were largely focused around getting people to do things that kind of violated their own moral conscience. He was trying to figure out how the Holocaust could happen, how these Nazi guards could stand by while this horror was going on. And unfortunately, his experiments really proved that people kind of do mostly what you ask them to do if you actually, kind of bully them a little bit. The experiments really became very controversial, and for the first time, this new social science of sort of data collection about human beings came into hot water. The idea that science might have some limits about how it might actually find out information about people. Of course, this is the debate we're having now every day about our friends at Facebook and at Google and other places about, well, how far can they go to actually find out information about us? So I think even though this is set in the past, I can't imagine a film more relevant to our community here. We're incredibly honored to have some wonderful guests this year. Of course, the two honorees that we've already announced, Richard Gere and Guillermo del Toro, are known to even the most casual film fans. Gere has been a Hollywood icon, not just a movie star, but an icon for 4 decades, more than 4 decades now, and has acted in some of the most famous films ever made. He'll be here long overdue and accepting an award for this career as an actor. We really look forward to the film he's presenting as well, Time Out of Mind, which is an early film handicapped for a Best Actor nomination. He's extraordinary in the movie, playing against type as a homeless man on the streets of New York. Guillermo del Toro, of course, is one of the most successful filmmakers of all time with films like Pacific Rim, but also one of the world's most treasured art filmmakers for films like Pan's Labyrinth, which won multiple Academy Awards, and The Devil's Backbone, which we'll be showing at the festival. Guillermo is also one of the great teachers of cinema. He will be walking us through his career with a lot of references to the whole history of the medium and his role as he perceives it within it. It'll be a fascinating conversation followed by a magnificent film. I think we're all in for a real treat with both of those guests. We always feel very blessed here at the San Francisco Film Society that the festival attracts some of the most interesting talent in world cinema. We have the world premiere of Isabella Rossellini's Green Porno Live. This is a fun romp through these cult videos that she made about sea creatures and bugs and how they have sex, and with a kind of lovely, gentle environmental message along with them, and then really takes her on the road with a stage show she created around this. Her personality shines through in the entire film, and she's just a wonderful person to have. And so we're looking forward to her being here, and she's going to be reunited here with Guy Maddin, the filmmaker, who of course she's collaborated with on many projects, and he's here with his new film, The Forbidden Room. So we're very pleased to be presenting 54, the director's cut. This is a film much maligned 20 years ago about the sort of happenings of Studio 54 and kind of the end of the dream there. The film had been widely changed by the distributor during the period before release, and now it's been restored to its original form and was a massive success at this year's Berlin Film Festival. Finally, the film that everyone hoped they would see came out. Everyone behind the film is so excited to see it back in circulation again, and we're really pleased to have director Mark Christopher and stars Ryan Phillippe and Breckin Meyer, both of whom continue to be very famous after that movie and are equally handsome. And they'll be here to celebrate this sort of coming out party, if you will, for 54 on American soil. In addition, we have Jason Schwartzman with us this year. His unusual offbeat movie, Seven Chinese Brothers, is perfect for Schwartzman fans of his idiosyncratic gestures and wonderful speech patterns. And so we'll be really looking forward to seeing him here as well. My favorite guest coming, though, is one of the most famous producers of all time you've never heard of, a woman named Nansen Shi, who's been the backbone of the Hong Kong film industry for now almost 4 decades, produced some of the most famous action films of all time, and she'll be here to walk us through her own personal history of Chinese cinema.
So right there, do I see a stamp of your, how shall I say, your proclivity for some films when you mentioned the Chinese or the Hong Kong director, because you were the founding director of Toronto Film Festival's you were curator of the Midnight Madness series, and I'm guessing, given the demographic makeup of Toronto, which is kind of similar to the Bay Area with a lot of Chinese and Hong Kong folks, I'm guessing that you must have done curated quite a few films from Hong Kong.
Yeah, I have a fairly long history with Chinese cinema. My mentor, David Overby, was a programmer for the Toronto Film Festival in East Asia. And he very much sort of sprung the lock on Hong Kong cinema when it broke open with the Hong Kong New Wave in the 1980s and popularized filmmakers like Choi Hark and John Woo. When he passed away, I took over his role and really got to know some of my very favorite people on the planet to this day during that period. Since then, I went and did a lot of different things, but always returned to Chinese cinema. just to see what's happening, and was fortunate enough in my last job at the TIFF Bell Lightbox in Toronto to be able to curate a landmark series of Chinese cinema that actually drew inspiration from Taiwan, mainland China, and Hong Kong, and was able to really delve into this history very seriously. So I'm definitely a proselytizer for the history of Hong Kong and Chinese cinema, and will continue to do so here. This special presentation with Nansun Shi on the taking of Tiger Mountain is definitely a little wedge drug for our audience as we start to move everyone into a greater appreciation and love of that part of the world and its cinema.
I didn't say the word proselytizer. You mentioned it, so I'm going to extend. Are you going to be proselytizing South Asian, specifically Bollywood films, in any, in the future?
One of the obvious great cinemas in the world comes from the subcontinent. And not just Bollywood, but all the amazing regional cinemas in India and increasingly now in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and even in Pakistan. There are exceptional filmmakers making exceptional movies all the time in a lot of different registers. I think it behooves us here at the San Francisco International Film Festival to address this. However, this has been a very complicated time. You'd even call it maybe a transition time in Indian cinema as the sort of digital revolution has sort of taken hold. And while there are some extraordinary films being made every year, we're kind of in a moment of looking back. And I don't think there was anything that really resonated with us this year that we felt we could put a real foot forward. In Toronto, the current director of the film festival, Cameron Bailey, and myself, when I was the director of the festival, really did a sort of a 3-year process where we were scouring in India just to make sure we would get exactly the right films to be able to expose the Bollywood idiom, but also other idioms in Indian cinema to Toronto audiences without freaking them out. I mean, obviously, the South Asian community will be very interested and very receptive to those films, but we want this to be a broad-based endeavor. And so our first go-around was the films of Mani Ratnam. Extraordinary filmmaker, continues to make exceptional movies. They were so accessible because he himself had been trained with Western films. So there was aspects of Charlie Chaplin, in some of his comedies like Thief. There was a kind of a sort of epic flavor to films like Roja and Nayakan, which really drew on The Godfather, and action films from the 1960s and 70s. So things that we really cared about. So I think we're looking for that kind of entry point that then we can grow the South Asian selection in the festival in the future. So not this year, but don't worry, we'll get there.
And I want to come back, and this will probably be my closing question. You're also proselytizing the Bay Area filmmakers, and you've got a bunch of films and filmmakers who are either from the Bay Area or have made films about the Bay Area. Could you expand on that?
We live in an incredibly exciting place. The Bay Area has become the focus of world attention. Our tech friends have probably been the drivers of this, but San Francisco's continuing influence on the socio-political conversation of the nature. Look what just happened with the Indiana religious freedom laws. The first people out of the gate to talk about that were the humanities experts, the press freedom experts, and the businesses of the San Francisco and greater Bay Area region. We led the conversation. Not Washington, not New York. San Francisco and the Bay Area led that conversation. This is happening in so many walks of life and is impacting so many different aspects of how we actually think of ourselves here in the United States as citizens. Though I'm not one, I'm Canadian. But I'll let myself be an honorary American for this conversation. I think that the Bay Area owes itself a certain amount of self-reflection and refraction to the rest of the world through its cultural institutions. I think what we feel the San Francisco Film Society and the Film Festival can do is accelerate these conversations through cinema. So when we find something that we think really addresses, say, this terrible, intractable problems around race and talking about race in this country right now, we see films like Stanley Nelson's exceptional Black Panthers documentary. We see the work of Noni de la Peña and her immersive journalism and how she's working with the tech sector to put us inside the eyes and the mind of law enforcement officials and their targets. And we see that the Bay Area can actually say things well beyond its borders that can affect incredibly important national conversations. So we're really proud of the ability of our filmmakers to be able to make that happen. On the other side, we also have one of the most important programs, if not the most important program in the country, for funding and creating opportunities for filmmakers working in independent film. So the Film House is one of the great residency programs of the country. 3 former residents of Film House have films in this festival, all of which are getting enormous attention at other festivals around the country. We're very proud of them, and we're very proud to have incubated those movies. Those filmmakers who were at our Film House include Jennifer Pong and her terrific film Advantageous, and Leah Wojcik and her film Very Semi-Serious about the New Yorker cartoonist. These are going to be 2 of the big films in the circuit this year. We also had films from our narrative granting side, a partnership with the Kenneth Rainin Foundation, where we were able to actually really significantly financially support feature films. 2 films that were in so one film that was in Sundance called Unexpected by Chris Swanberg, one of the best reviewed films out of the festival. Very interesting take on 2 women, one a white teacher and one her black student who get pregnant simultaneously, and the arc that they go on together. We also have a project development department that really helps with documentary films as they are fiscally sponsored through our organization. And we've mentored films such as Jenny Olsen's Royal Road and the wonderful documentary out of Sundance Western. So we're incredibly proud to have been with this diverse slate of films, which don't necessarily speak to the Bay Area. Royal Road does, a couple of other ones do. But basically, these are films that we just see as representing the best talent of the Bay Area that we want to continue to support and to attract more filmmakers to the Bay Area to make this an incredibly important creative zone.
After having spent a significant amount of time in Toronto at the Toronto Film Festival, and then you took, a couple of small diversions, what prompted you to come to San Francisco and head what is labeled as the oldest film festival in America?
In the Americas. So yeah, San Francisco International Film Festival is the oldest film festival in the Western Hemisphere. But that's not what drew me to come here. While it has a storied history, it has an even brighter future. I think the Bay Area and San Francisco in particular is the locus of change in not only the United States but in the world. And so if we can just catch the tail of this innovation culture, if we can find partners throughout the Bay Area region to champion the kinds of cinema that matter to us, we can actually help change the world and its perception of our medium and have people embrace great cinema that they might not otherwise know about.
I know I mentioned final question a couple of questions ago, but this is going to be my final. Since you were the founding director of the Bell Lightbox at Toronto, do you have a vision of a similar kind of an outfit here in San Francisco where you would marry your love for films with your newfound love for technology?
We really don't have plans right now to build something in the Film Society's name. I think we're really interested in this other concept, which is Film Society everywhere, that we should find partners throughout the whole Bay Area region to sort of share our enthusiasm and love of cinema and to generate even more partnerships and collaborations that can actually help champion the films that we think matter. So, we have great ones this year with people like Telluride Film Festival, Pacific Film Archive, SF MoMA. We're doing this great thing with Miranda July with them. The Alamo Draft House, which is going to come in and just be a great force for change and down in the Mission in terms of the film culture down there. And a lot of quieter partnerships as well, sort of smaller marketing concepts and, sort of joint presentations with NGOs, Human Rights Watch, for example, and other political and sort of thought leader organizations throughout the Bay Area. This, to me, is actually maybe a bit more important right now, that we actually create a unified culture, something which we can all share as Bay Area citizens to really understand how we can impact cinema and we can really impact the future of the films that matter.
Thank you so much for doing this interview, Noah. It is very, very clear that you are a man on a mission.
Thanks so much. I mean, ultimately, we just love great films here. We just want to make everyone love them just as much as we do.